everybody to this Spark debate, all about regulation. We have an expert with us, Sue Asquith, who you've been introduced to. Thank you to those in the chat who are telling me where they're from. Willow Children's Centre. Whereabouts in the country is that? I expect you've all had a really busy day. So, welcome, Sue.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this. I know we've spoken loads of times, but we've never done a debate, have we? So I'm really looking forward to it.
No, we haven't done a debate. We've done a bit of training.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so this regulation malarkey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm continually asked about it. And obviously it's an important subject because we've got lots of people here this evening.
Mm-hmm.
So where should we start? Well, we could just say what it is and go home, I suppose.
I think it's really good to kind of maybe put it out there in terms of what I think it is and how I describe it. And then obviously if anybody wants to join in terms of the chat to say if they agree or disagree or what have you, we can maybe take it from there. I know lots of people I know lots of people on social media talk about the children's behaviour and how it's spiralling and how they're really struggling to try and manage children's behaviour. But if we try and spin it around on its head, I try and think about self-regulation. So what is self-regulation? Because dysregulated children are usually showing us the behaviours that these people are talking about. So if I can maybe just start by introducing what I think self-regulation is, I think maybe it would be a good start as a platform, a springboard for this evening. So I think this, in terms of the ability to be able to understand and manage your own energy states, your own emotions, your behaviours, and pay attention in a socially acceptable way. And that might seem a small sentence, but when we think of our small children, they're not born with this ability to self-regulate. So obviously we need to help them to be able to do that as well. And as adults, adults, I think that we have to obviously learn to behave in different ways depending on where we are as well. So all those different social rules are overcoming and overwhelming, I think, also for children.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, because children come to us in nurseries and preschools and have perhaps one set of expectations, and then they have another set of expectations at home, and they probably have another set of expectations with grandparents, etc. So it can be quite confusing for them, can't it?
Yeah.
But self-regulation starts much later, doesn't it, than early years?
Yeah, I mean, we're building the skills, hopefully, for children to be self-regulated in the end. I mean, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, it's one of the early learning goals, talks about whether children can self-regulate. But obviously, there's a lot hinging on that, really, isn't there? There's obviously what's happening at home, and whether they have been supported in early childhood, any trauma or adverse childhood experiences that might be happening as well. There's a lot hinging on it, really, and it's quite complicated, isn't it? Even in nursery, I know you just highlighted the difficulty maybe with the children in terms of different rules with different people, but even in nursery, what's socially acceptable when you're sat down for lunch is different to what's socially acceptable when you're outside playing, or when you sat maybe doing a circle time, or when you're in free flow play. So even there, even though we've got consistent boundaries and expectations, depending on where they are and what time of day it is, there's lots of different variations there, isn't there, as well, that can be quite confusing.
And also, I think, between members of staff as well. So unless there is a real underpinning ethos around how things should be, how things should be, I don't want to use the word manage. how people are going to
support children,
respond to behaviour, and that can be quite difficult if you've got a big staff team.
Yeah, and I think also depends on what presses the adults' buttons as well, because some adults can put up with a lot of noise and some don't, and some like a lot of mess and some don't. So I think it's it's very, you try and standardise your staff approach, but it isn't easy, is it? Because every adult's obviously a unique adult, as well as every child being a unique child. So there's lots going on, isn't there?
Right. So what does everybody think? Would they agree? I mean, I agree with that. I personally have an issue with the word dysregulation when it comes to describing a temper tantrum, because I think a temper tantrum is what we call a certain sort of behaviour, and dysregulation is more about all sorts of behaviour, biting, scratching, anything we find unacceptable. And I would really like a term to replace temper tantrum, so it is actually identified as a specific stage of development, really.
Yeah. And if I go on to obviously talk about things in training and in my book, I try and clarify when I use different terms what I'm meaning, and then obviously people are on the same page there as well. And I do think there's a massive difference between a temper tantrum, which it can be almost controlling, having a little bit of a stamp of foot, put my pet lip out, or see if I can push the boundaries. Let's see if I can get this. Which I usually define as a tantrum. But then I think when you've got the opposite end of the scale, when you are dysregulated, it's that fight and flight syndrome. It's that I'm in meltdown, my body is getting too much information, I'm so overwhelmed with what's going on. And that's when I would use that term dysregulation. But people sometimes don't understand, or maybe don't differentiate the difference, and so therefore they really struggle then when they're seeing these behaviours and wanting to be able to manage the behaviours. And this is where I think a lot of people see the light sometimes once they've done the reading or the training behind it, and they start to think, well, actually, is this controlling tantrum kind of behaviour, or is this I'm in overwhelm and I can't really do anything about this in fight and flight?
I think you can really see that. Personally, I think you can really see the difference, because a child having a full meltdown isn't in control of anything, are they? They've totally lost it. Whereas a child that sticks their bottom lip out and stamps their foot is much more in control of what's going on. I feel.
But often a child who is willful, wanting their own way in such a manner, if they don't get their own way, and perhaps the pet lip and the stampy foot thing does work at home maybe or elsewhere, and maybe in the setting you're not going to give in and give the chocolate before lunch or whatever they're wanting. So then I think sometimes they can then flip into meltdown, because it's like, why aren't you giving in? I don't understand this. I'm getting crosser and crosser. And then they can obviously go past the point of no return in terms of the explosion at the top of the volcano that I often talk about. And then obviously they can turn into a meltdown because they've lost control of their feelings again. So I think a lot of people do understand it once they started to take the time to listen and to differentiate, and then they can easily spot it too. But I think a lot of people don't have that kind of baseline knowledge maybe to kind of differentiate what's going on there, and maybe trying to support children in different ways depending on what's causing it.
I mean, I before I started my nurseries and before the software, I worked in various settings with children with additional needs, and for me, there was always a cause for the behaviour. It's not the child is communicating something, or there's something, they're communicating something. And for me, it's, I always have to look for that reason and try to sort the reason out, or step in, hopefully, before, it gets to the point where the child is so angry, or the child is so sad, or whatever's going on. It's about tuning in, isn't it? And I mean, I think as educators, tuning in to children in all respects is so important.
Getting to know that individual child, and if there is underlying maybe special educational needs or a sensory processing difficulty, trying to really understand I know you've heard me speak before, Catherine, on self-regulation, and a couple of the people that have introduced themselves tonight in the chat have also heard me speak before. But I always think about that iceberg approach, that, okay, we can see the iceberg, but we need to do a deep dive to think about what the trigger might be, and it's not always obvious. So it's that kind of wider awareness, isn't it, and trying to get as much information from parents and observe, like you say, and really attune to the child to see if we can find out as much about them as possible, and try and put your finger on what's causing it. Maybe get them thinking about that trigger, and then trying as much as possible to avoid the trigger or minimize the trigger, so that the children aren't feeling so out of control and overwhelmed with life as well.
I mean, in my nurseries, a child who had a temper tantrum, I have actually just recently sold my last nursery, so I'm in between tenses here. We always felt a child often, not always, but often they have to feel secure to have that temper tantrum. So in some ways, it's a good thing if a child has a meltdown. Because children who are not feeling so safe and secure are not likely to put them, to end up in that situation. They're more likely to bottle things up, I think. You raised another point, though, which I think is one that perhaps we could explore a bit. I mean, working in a nursery, you might have 5 2-year-olds to 1 adult now, and there's all sorts of pressures going on. Mrs. Bloggs isn't happy, and so-and-so's lost their socks, and somebody's just called in sick, and I'm not sure when I'm going to have my coffee break, and I've got all these things to do before such and such a time, and soon it's going to be snack time, and there's so much pressure, I think, on practitioners to be doing their job role that to regulate themselves can be quite a challenge sometimes.
It can, and if you're not quite in control of your own emotions as an adult, I tend to talk about our fuse, our patience, our fuse being shorter. So if you are stressed or hasn't slept well or not feeling very well, or there's anything going on at home to kind of upsetting and trauma and things, then your fuse is shorter. And then a child might not be doing anything particularly challenging, maybe, but because your fuse is short and you're not regulated yourself, then maybe your buttons are pressed quicker than they normally would do. I often talk nowadays, because there are so many children that maybe are dysregulated or unsettled, or taken a lot of settling, maybe in terms of PSED or communication and language delayed. And I often talk about the teachers in schools, and also the practitioners and teachers in and childminders, obviously, in early years, being like a graceful swan. We need to appear as though with this graceful thing floating on the water, but yet underneath we could be pedaling away, really trying to do all that juggling that you're talking about. But obviously children pick up on our stresses as well. So if we don't put that graceful swan thing on, then obviously they're going to pick up on what we're feeling as well. So it's a real tricky one, isn't it? Because there are a lot of stressed out adults there as well. And the mental health issues that we're hearing about from managers a lot, and how they're having to obviously support a lot of staff as well. So it is a really challenging time living in as well. And
it's just a huge subject, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of everything influences everything else, and yet, from my perspective, talking to people on a regular basis that are running nurseries or owning nurseries and managing them, I don't often. Sometimes I feel there's not enough emphasis on caring for the team. I tend to be a bit of an agony aunt, to be honest. I don't just help people with software. I also hear all their strains and stresses, and being a manager can be quite a lonely place, as can an owner, and I've been both those. And so I often hear, I've had an awful day. This happened, this happened, this happened before we actually do anything we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy, and I'm very happy to do that. But sometimes I feel there isn't enough care for the staff that are looking after the children. It can be quite there could be quite a blame culture towards the team rather than a caring one, which I think is a bit unfortunate. And sorry, I just need to say something else. Some people might have heard me say this before, but we don't have research tells us we don't have a memory before the age of 6. Although we might think we remember something, it possibly is something that we've heard or photographs we've seen. But we all know as educators, I'm sure, that everything that happened to us in our childhood affects our adult life in some way. And if we had bad experiences in life, we can justify those, and we make ourselves better from that, whatever that was. But the unconscious bit that we don't remember, the snappy member of staff who is at a loose, the last straw, who snaps at a child, those adult behaviours towards the children we look after will also affect their adult lives. And I'm only pointing this out, not blaming anybody, because we're human beings, but we have such a responsibility as early years practitioners, and I don't think sometimes that's taken seriously. So I just have to say it. I say it quite a lot, really.
I think conversely, though, I understand what you're saying about staff attitudes and things like that, and how that blame culture can be there. But I do also work with a lot of settings where managers are very caring, and the staff feel really supported. But then on Facebook, again, depending on which groups you're in, you'll probably hear the managers who think that they're so caring, they do reward every week, they do this and this and this for staff, but then they don't feel that the staff are putting the effort in and really kind of being a team player that other way as well. So
or appreciating it.
Yeah. So there's they just kind of expect it after a while, but then they're not putting the effort in to do the job, never mind over and above the job maybe.
And I did say sometimes, Sue.
Yeah.
and that's why I often have to say that we have such a responsible job, and we really must take it very seriously.
At the end of the day, we need to remember, I know it's part of our title of what we're talking about tonight, but we've got to remember that to help children to be in a situation where they might be able to achieve the learning goal in terms of self-regulation moving forward, that babies and young children are going to need our help and in terms of co-regulation. And they don't yet understand, obviously, the sensory processing and the things that are affecting the body. So when you were talking about earlier, maybe that 1-to-5 ratio with 2-year-olds, if we've got a lot of frustrated 2-year-olds, or lots of 2-year-olds that really want to be independent and do their own thing, and they're all wanting to do different things, and obviously there's going to be a lot of frustration there for the children. And obviously staff are going to need to be regulated themselves so that they can support that co-regulation process with those children, and then build those foundations, those positive blueprints in their brain for them to be able to go on and maybe use those self-regulation pathways in their future lives as well. So it's a huge responsibility in early years, isn't it, as parents and practitioners and teachers?
Yeah, actually, well, I would like to bring in parents into the conversation, but before we do that, let's just talk about co-regulation then, because okay, we ultimately want children to be self-regulated before they go to school, which is a tall deal, a tall deal, I feel. But yes, I agree. We want to help and support children to become self-regulated, whatever age that becomes apparent. But how do we do that? This word co-regulation's been floating about now since 2022, was it?
Something like that. Yeah. So I always say in training, in baby training or self-regulation training, that if we think of our brain, and obviously we think about the top bit of your brain being your thinking brain, that for babies and young children who are dysregulated or who are having unhappy feelings in their body, that we almost need to be their prefrontal cortex, their thinking brain, and try to kind of rational think what is wrong, what is this child communicating when they're crying or doing whatever. Do they need feeding? Does a baby, for example, need feeding, cuddling, nappy changing? Are they tired? What is it that's kind of dysregulated in their body? And if we manage to put our finger on exactly what that is and be able to sort that out by feeding, comforting, helping them to go to sleep, changing nappies, whatever it is, the babies learn that, wow, that was uncomfortable, but actually I feel okay again now. So they understand that, yes, they're going to have these uncomfortable feelings, but they also understand with adult help at that time, in hopefully a reasonable period of time and in a calm, caring manner, that uncomfortable feeling goes away. And then as toddlers, maybe we can start giving them a little bit more of a, wow, it looks as though you might be hungry. Shall we go do this? Or you look sad. Do you want to get your comfort blanket and go to sleep? Whatever it is, we can try and help them kind of verbalize that as well. And then hopefully, slowly but surely, they're getting our help little bit by little bit to be able to understand their feelings. But again, it's a tall order, isn't it, by the time they're 4 and going to school? But we can certainly hopefully help them on the road to self-regulation. If they are competent learners, and obviously if they're skillful communicators, if those PSED skills and also communication language skills, and building that literacy, that emotional literacy, so that they've got the words to go with the feelings, and then hopefully we can help them with those strategies, what they can possibly deploy when they're feeling dysregulated as well.
Going back to communication skills, we had a baby who actually asked for a drink using Makaton at 6 months old.
Yeah.
And I would recommend everybody to consider using sign language to help with the frustrations of communicating.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
But a few babies now who baby sign, the mums have gone to baby, well, dads as well maybe, but in the cases that I'm talking about, the mums had gone to baby sign. And I did some work actually with a lady from a baby sign company last year, and I spoke at their conference. And it's amazing how the little babies, even though they haven't got a word for that, can pick up the sign for milk or I'm hungry or what have you.
Yeah. And well, we know that understanding happens first, don't we? And I mean, they obviously are understanding a lot, but they can't actually vocalize what they want. I just think it just was an amazing part of my career. I'll always remember it. It made me go goosebumpy at the time when I heard, and it certainly makes me go goosebumpy now.
Yeah.
So
it's also amazing though that obviously babies have differentiated cries when they're tiny as well, so they've got a different cry for a different thing, and that's amazing as well, isn't it, when they're so tiny that they can do a different pitch cry or do something different with their tongue or their mouth to kind of make us understand that actually that's a cry for this and this. So that's an amazing thing as well.
One of the nurseries that I opened, I had trouble getting planning permission, and somebody that I knew, somebody who worked for me, knew one of the neighbours, and she visited them, and they said, "Oh, the nursery can't be full. We don't hear the children crying very much." I was so proud.
Yeah.
I don't think a baby should ever be left to cry. We used to hear health visitors leaving babies to cry, suggesting and taking dummies away and that sort of thing. I'm no disrespect to health visitors, because there's many health visitors will be giving the right advice, but you always hear the odd one that makes you cringe. Okay, so I would like practitioners and educators at every level and parents particularly, perhaps, everybody, to really understand that behaviour that we see in young children is absolutely normal. And it might be irritating it might be unacceptable, but it's very normal. And when toddlers bite each other, it's because they can't express how they feel. They can't express I want the toy, etc. But parents, that's another kettle of fish when it comes to explaining how to help children with that are displaying what was called negative behaviour.
Yeah, I think this is a big thing as well, and I've done quite a few different workshops now over the last 18 months or so, internationally and in the UK, for parents. A couple of the children's centres that you mentioned earlier when you were welcoming people in with the comments, they did one with me last year. So we did staff training, and then we also did a parent workshop. And the parent workshop is on a link that they've got access to and ongoing, so that parents can listen back to the playback. And there was some really, really good feedback from there, and parents were finding it really useful.
It's interesting to see some of the people that are listening tonight have already had Sue's training, but how do you deal with how do you deal with a child that bites? I know how we did it, but how we did it probably wouldn't be seen as appropriate now. I mean, I'll tell you.
It depends why they're biting, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I'm talking a toddler. So a toddler biting for whatever reason, we would always comfort the child that had been bitten in a big way, and if we were consistent with that, then the child that did the biting would just get the message that it wasn't appropriate.
It depends if it's attention seeking, or as I now call it, attention connecting behaviour. I don't know whether, some children have learned that they're going to get that attention if they bite. But if another child, for example, it was a sensory processing thing where they're not getting enough information in terms of their oral sense of in terms of what's going in the mouth, etc., then we can maybe start to think, well, actually, that's not attention seeking or attention connecting. It's not out of frustration. It's the fact that actually they need more stimulus. So therefore, then what can we do for that child so that they don't feel the need to bite somebody? So is there anything that they can chew on? Can you give them a crunchy snack? What is it? They need that extra input sensory wise. So then what is it? I keep trying to put lots of people want the training, and I do it kind of one-to-one. And I've tried to put in a sensory processing training on a couple of times, but there are so many people stretched because, like we've said with the staff, if you've had to cover somebody and what have you, then the last thing you want to do maybe is log on at night to do that. That's
new to me, Sue. Thank you for that.
No
I can remember a little girl who she chewed everything she was 4, right, almost up till she went to school. And we gave her, she used to chew books, her clothes, everything went in her mouth. And we actually gave her a chewy toy.
Yep.
So we offered her the chewy toy. So we did right there.
Yeah, you did. Sensory seeking behaviour. Some of the people, if children, for example, are fussy eaters, sometimes they're fussy eaters because maybe what the parents do and don't give them maybe at home, maybe sometimes they're fussy eaters because they're the opposite end of the spectrum to the children who want things in their mouth, and they're not sensory seeking, they're obviously aversion then to sensory as well. So some of those children are you can see, tip of the iceberg, you can see sensory fussy eating, but actually when you unpick it, it's the textures, the senses, the smells, whatever it is that they're adverse to as well. But our sensory seeking behaviours, you still see adults who chew the end of the pens and things like that, and they're all, they're still wanting that kind of sensory input, even though they're adults, they've still got
What
that.
What about smoking? Does smoking go along with that?
Could be. Could be. Yeah. Yeah. So there's loads of different things, isn't there, that we can kind of pick up on once you're more aware. I keep talking about these toolboxes. I know people who have listened to me before will know that I talk about these lots. But if you think about your knowledge as a child carer, practitioner, a teacher, whatever. Every time you listen to a debate, do a piece of training, read a blog, if you put in different tools in your toolbox, then sometimes you can see something in a child what you can think, actually, I wonder if it's this, and let me try that. And it's almost like getting a different spanner out to see whether that works, or a different Allen key if you're doing your DIY. And the more tools you've got, the more likely you are to have that knowledge or that solution to be able to support that child as well.
So what about supporting parents then with behaviours that either happen in provision, or behaviours perhaps that are happening at home, the parents not actually handling very well?
I think you touched on something earlier. Parents sometimes find it embarrassing, don't they? They just try and, you mentioned it maybe that they're doing it nurse. Oh no, they don't do that at home, and actually they know full well they're doing it all the time, maybe at home. Or maybe they don't do it at home because that 2-year-old they don't have that kind of competition for toys and things at home. So sometimes we are seeing behaviours that are not happening at home. But internationally, when I've been doing the parent workshops, it's been astounding to everybody that's put one on that the parents have been so open to want to know questions, because a lot of parents are very shy and unassuming and don't really want to ask a question in front of everybody else with the international places that I work in. But they absolutely wanted help with behaviours, and intergenerationally as well. Obviously, sometimes there's a massive difference within the household about who deems what as naughty and what to do about it, and the rest of it's really a challenging thing sometimes. But the international workshops and the ones I've done in the UK have been really, really useful for parents, because they felt as though they're not judged and they're able to come forward and ask questions in an unassuming way. And also, like you said earlier, telling them it's fine, your child is 2, they're going to have those little moments from time to time. But you've not to be, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Every 2-year-old has possibly had one somewhere, and some just have it more publicly than others, and what you can do, and not to feel judged by it. And parents do feel judged. I think it was the Royal Foundation report, wasn't it, around lockdown-ish 2020, 2021, that said that the biggest reason for parents to feel judged is when their child is behaving, or when somebody talks to them about their child's behaviour. So if your child was having a massive, whether it was a tantrum or a meltdown in a park or a supermarket or somewhere, you'd feel parents feel judged about how they handle that, whether they're going to be too harsh with their child or whether they're too lenient with their child. But parenting styles change, don't they? Around the world, there are lots of different parenting styles. And obviously, if there are 2 parents on board, they need to find some medium ground, maybe, in terms of what kind of approach they're going to take to that as well. And not feel embarrassed, because most of us have had a child in a complete ding-dong at some stage somewhere, haven't we? So, just to kind of be true to yourself, and obviously be consistent for your child.
My husband and I, with my children, we used to talk about the weather a lot. Whenever we started talking about the weather, it was ignore it. Just had this, and you can do the same thing in nurseries, can't you? You can pull your ears or put your hand on your head to signal to other people in the room to deal with it in a certain way, whatever it is, in a certain way. I think
sometimes it's that acknowledgement, though, isn't it? Even if they are thinking that they're doing something, and you think that the first thing to do is ignore it, sometimes they up it, and sometimes just trying to go, I realise that this is really stressful, or I realise you're really, really cross about this, and trying to give them that word for that emotion, and that's obviously helping with that co-regulation as well, because it's building up emotional literacy.
I was thinking more about sibling rivalry, to be fair.
Yeah.
And you have that in nursery too. You have children who love each other and perhaps will bite each other, actually. They actually love each other, but they don't know how to be gentle with each other yet. I'm thinking about babies and toddlers. They get overexcited about it.
It's still modelling though, isn't it? And thinking about how to co-regulate, show them how to be kind, use kind hands.
Be kind to your friends.
Yeah, being kind to your friends, whether your friend is a sister or a brother, I don't know as well. But how to, to do that sharing and being kind as well, so they can use that model at home or with the siblings in the setting and with other people as well. And having that same expectation actually as well, isn't it? That it's not kind or fair or okay to bite your brother. And it isn't kind of fair or okay to bite anybody else either. So just supporting, understanding what's going on and supporting, I think that's the biggest thing.
But sometimes I think children will sort things that are not tiny children, but 3-year-olds often can sort things out for themselves between each other.
Yeah.
And we need to step back and allow that to happen. I feel.
I think so. I think we call it conflict resolution nowadays, don't we, sometimes? But for a 3-year-old to do that, they've got to be supported as 2-year-olds to be able to do that. So, for example, everybody's behaviour management policy at one stage used to talk about distraction, didn't it? So if all you ever did is distract child when there's potential of conflict in terms of sharing or what have you, you distract, they're not going to have those stepping stones and those skills to be able to sort that out for themselves at 3.
Yeah, well, distraction was just a way for the adult to be okay, really. To smooth things over.
And maybe sometimes distraction in a tiny way is still okay, because obviously if that's a sensory thing, then obviously distracting them away to something where it's all those tools again, isn't it? It's understanding what the different things are and which spanner and which Allen key and which strategies to use it at whatever time. But yeah, I do think this distraction is one of the many little things, but talking through, it looks as though you want that toy, shall we go ask or whatever, and just talking them through those various different steps. And then hopefully then they've got various strategies and various blueprints and maybe tools in their toolkit, maybe, I've never really thought about it that way, to be able to do their own conflict management at 3 and 4, maybe. It's just building the skills, isn't it?
Yeah, what about persona dolls? How do you feel about persona dolls?
I've never used a persona doll. I know what one is. We used to have empathy dolls in Kirklees, where I come from, when we had the empathy doll training. That was a little bit different because the empathy doll took on it was a person. It's supposed to be a person at all times, and I think sometimes they do have a little bit of a place. And again, it depends, isn't it, on the training. Some people use the persona dolls and empathy dolls. Some people use different things like the emotion stones and puppets and things. And
I haven't used emotion stones, but I found persona dolls very helpful actually if they're used properly. The doll is not a doll. They don't use it as a doll. It's just a being that has these problems and is feeling however the doll is feeling. And the children help to find solutions to help the doll with the feelings that they have. We had several dolls, different ethnicity, and they had their own, they had their own family, and the children knew all about them. But whenever they came to see the children, they always had a problem, and they were very useful. But for older children, obviously, I mean, that's, recognizing feelings is something else. We can help children co-regulate, but they also need to understand, they also need to learn that this feeling they have is possibly called this,
And that's part of co-regulation, isn't it? Obviously, for babies, you try and sort it out straight away, but as toddlers and as they're growing, trying to name it to tame it, is it Daniel Siegel that says that? To try and name it to tame it, so you acknowledge, oh, I think I heard your tummy rumbling. This snack over here, shall we go sort that out or whatever? To try and build up that emotional literacy so that they've got the feeling name to go with whatever they're feeling, and then they can start to be able to do that. But that's all the part of the what I'd call the co-regulation skills, so that they're on the way to self-regulation. So I think our task and role in terms of co-regulation changes depending on the age and stage of the child, because obviously we've got to give them those skills and slowly hand over that control almost for that self-regulation to themselves, haven't we, as well?
And recognise that they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
What about policy then, Sue? You know, behaviour management policy.
Oh, you'll know that I don't like that. Okay.
No,
so
no. That's what I
Yeah.
don't think any setting should have a behaviour management policy now.
Yeah.
But you know, what do we call it? Because we need to have some policy in how we are going to handle.
Okay. I would suggest, and I would love actually, to go into every nursery. I haven't got time to go into every nursery in the UK or all world round sorting this out, but I would love, first of all, for the EYFS, the next rewrite, for it to stop saying how we manage children's behaviour. Any training that I do is always called helping children to manage their behaviour, or supporting with self-regulation skills, or what have you. So I would love for every policy in every nursery, preschool, childminder, kindergarten, international school, whatever we're doing, to rewrite that kind of wording to make sure that it's not. At the end of the day, I always say this, at the end of the day, as an adult, you might know what's socially expected of you, but only you is in control of what you're going to do. So there's only you that can manage to behave that way. And if you decided to be really nasty suddenly and start swearing in online and things, then that's you, isn't it? That's not me controlling your behaviour. That's you deciding to do whatever. So I think we need to really think about these behaviour managements and start to think about how we're supporting children to manage their behaviour, or helping children on the pathway to whatever it is. Or maybe we just dump the behaviour policy and just call everything self-regulation, helping to, realising self-regulation. And don't even get me started about the secondary schools, positive behaviour pyramids and all this rubbish that we get when we get the stamps for comments in planners for being cheeky when you're actually asking a question about something that you didn't understand, and just because they're working in silence they get something, and then they try and say, but I just asked, and then they get another one, and then if they try and explain themselves again, they're in detention because they've had 2 comments within 30 seconds, and then suddenly they've got to do detention in 2 days.
That actually reminds me, and I doubt if it's still the case, but at one time Ofsted wanted a bullying policy in early years. I refused to do it. I put it in some other policy. I mentioned it, but they actually wanted a bullying policy in early years, and I just don't think any child bullies in early years.
Or maybe we should call that, if we needed a bullying policy, an anti-bullying policy, because we don't want a policy about bullying. We want a policy about not having bullies.
Well,
but I don't think children in early years need that. I'm just thinking about, if we're thinking about a self-regulation thing, and now we're trying to help children to manage their own behaviour, by the time they get to secondary school, that's almost, I was going to say beaten out of them, but it's this, we've encouraged this, nurtured this child and these children, and then suddenly they've just got to put up and shut up and do as they're told, which is not anything to do with fundamental values or anything when we're thinking about early years policy either, is it? And
but hopefully, like the rest, everything else the child is learning before school that has such an effect on the rest of their lives, their blueprint, as you mentioned. Hopefully, regardless of what they experience later, they will still be able to self-regulate and use the skills that they've been helped with in early years.
Hopefully, but I mean, it's that unjust thing, isn't it? At the end of the day, if they haven't done anything wrong and they've got a comment, and then they haven't done anything wrong and they're trying to defend themselves because they haven't done anything and got a comment, and then suddenly they've been rude twice. But like you say, when you've lost control, or when you're really cross, you can say something, within 30 seconds twice, and then suddenly you're in detention at 14, 15, 16. And that, in terms of mental health and everything else, and pressing children nowadays, I think it's a huge, huge thing. And that, again, secondary schools, I do a lot of primary school talks. I do a lot of, obviously, of early years talks. I'd love to get into secondary schools and get that sorted as well, because there's so much that needs doing, I think, for mental health issues in secondary schools as well, in terms of, I understand that teenagers do, you know, they're a different kettle of fish and they maybe need tighter boundaries, and obviously teachers haven't got any control almost and things. I understand it's a really, really difficult thing to balance out, but we do need to make sure that the children's mental health in secondary schools not suffering.
Well, a lot of people that perhaps are listening or are working with teenagers, you know, they're not just confined to schools, are they?
Exactly. And we, you know, I think I've brought hopefully both my boys up, now 27 and 18, to be respectful, to understand what they need to do, but actually also stick up for themselves if something's gone wrong. And, you know, so that's it's a big thing, isn't it?
I mean, a strategy. Sorry, we're going off the subject.
We've gone off subject,
but the strategy there is to deal with it after the event, isn't it? Just like to be an early years educator, we might not agree with something, and hopefully we don't get stroppy about it there and then, but we deal with the situation the best we can, and then we go and talk about it to somebody afterwards and say, I'm really sorry, I didn't agree with what happened, and that's being a professional.
Yeah, but that's an adult head, isn't it? And we're talking about
yes, but I mean, but you know, we're helping little children co-regulate. We perhaps need to help teenagers have strategies to sort their problems out so they don't get detention.
And maybe not all the schools are the same list of schools around here as well. Maybe I'm just being really harsh, but I'm not the only one that says this. And obviously I get people talking to me after the courses I run up and down the country as well to say, what happens with teenagers? And I usually say to them, I know I've been talking to you all morning, but I could talk to you all afternoon about this as well. And I'm going home because I've got the train to catch. But I understand what you're saying.
Well, often I've in the past, I've said that teenagers are like 2-year-olds.
They can be, and that's,
you know, they want to control. They want to control their lives. They want to, you know, they want to be totally independent. They want everything themselves. And when somebody gets in the way, then you know, hell lets loose, or could be let loose.
Maybe we need another talk another time about the preteens and the brain. But it's fascinating. If you read about the fascinating things that happen in the brain when they're going through puberty and why they act like a 2-year-old in a 5'10" body or whatever, however tall they are. There's lots of things happening, but it's really, really interesting to me anyway.
I find the brain development, early years brain development, amazing. I'm fascinated by how we react and how everything is normal, etc. Yes. There's another Spark debate. If you go into YouTube, you'll see there's been some really good Spark debates, and we have had a past one on behaviour policy. I can't remember what it was called. Should we have a policy be called behaviour management or something like that? When I let you know that the film's on YouTube, I'll try and direct you to it. But very much in line with Sue, but in a different way. So it's quite interesting to listen to.
Quite interesting to find out what everybody else has got to say about things, isn't it, as well? Maybe pick up tips from them as well. I've got a blog that I'm halfway through. I'm halfway through it from about 6 weeks ago that I've not managed to finish. And I think I've started to call it something like our behaviour policies causing more harm than good. And it's not necessarily aimed at the early years, let's put it that way. But I'm thinking, I know you've started to explore my website, Catherine, but the Parents Hub as well as the practitioners pages. I'm trying to be as useful as I can with different blogs on different pages, so that I can obviously target different audiences there as well. And my aim over the next months is to continue with those blogs as well. So hopefully making it a really useful place for everybody as well, parents as well as practitioners as well.
Excellent. Right, how are we doing for time? I've got my glasses on. Fine, we're fine. Right, has anybody got any questions? Everybody's been really quiet on the chat. Either they've gone to sleep, doubt. Come on, people, give us some comment. What do you think? Anybody got any strong views? I mean, gone are the days of the naughty chair. Hopefully, gone are the days of the time out. Hopefully. I think that is still used sometimes.
We could maybe talk about timeout while somebody maybe comments in the comment box. But rather than calling it timeout, I think sometimes that children do need that calm down corner or cave or whatever it is as well. Sometimes children need, when we think about sensory processing, sometimes they need some extra stuff going into their body, but sometimes they need some calm. And not time out, the humiliating naughty chair, whatever it is, but actually, are there cozy places in settings for them to be able to go sit on a beanbag or on a big cushion or in a teepee or whatever? You know, it's part of the strategies, isn't it? I'm feeling too much. I don't want to be sociable anymore. I'm just going to go sit over here.
Go away and have a quiet time.
Yeah.
I love this. What do you think of saying sorry? I have a real strong opinion about making children say sorry. But
it can be a massive Mexican standoff, can't they, with sorry? Because for children or for anybody to say sorry, they've got to understand that they've done something wrong or not acceptable, or they've said something to hurt somebody or something like that. And a lot of children, if they've done something, I've either done it in fight and flight mode and they're not aware of it, or a 2-year-old has snatched, but actually they don't really understand that concept yet because they're not really seeing the Piaget's mountains and things like that. So really important, I think, maybe to say it would be nice if, or do you want to? But actually, I think I was a preteen maybe at that kind of brain thing where I had this standard, I am not saying sorry, and I do not care, I am not. And thankfully my dad was really, really, really good with me rather than being really, really cross with me. And he supported me through all sorts of things. And actually I didn't need to say sorry. I was welcomed back in, and, you know, it was, you know, a nice hug, come and sit with me and what have you. And going back, obviously I'm 53, so that at that age was possibly quite revolutionary really compared to what we maybe had when we were growing up as well. So I don't think sorry. Maybe we can talk about sorry when children understand the other side of the mountain.
I think saying sorry is a feeling within. You need to feel that you want to say sorry, and I think it's a stage of development. So for a little child, I wouldn't expect a little child to say sorry, but I might say that I was sorry that the child got hurt, and do it that way. I mean, it's like asking a child to do something. We don't ask a child to write their name in early years until they've got all the pre-writing skills to do so they can be successful at it. If we force a child to write before they're ready, they're going to write it back to front, they're going to form every letter wrong, etc., etc. So we can force a child to say sorry, but they won't actually feel it inside them. They're just doing it to please the adult. And I would rather leave the saying sorry to when the children are much older. That's my view.
Well, another one of my famous sayings that people will have heard probably before if you've heard me speaking, but if you know the game Monopoly, you used to get that get out of jail free card, didn't you? On the
you still do.
And that's exactly what the sorry word is for some children. They learn sorry is going to get them out. I said sorry, and somebody's going to come back. I said sorry, I said it, and they think that that's going to be okay, and actually, you know, it isn't okay. And they've got to understand, first of all, haven't they? They've hurt somebody's feelings, or if they've lost control, if they've seen red, if they're in meltdown, they're not going to understand what they've done. So therefore, they're not going to want to say sorry or feel the need to say sorry. So it's a huge, huge thing, isn't it? And I would rather not, to be honest.
Yes, I agree with you. Right. So we've got something else. I'm trying to educate our parents on time in. Parents just giving their children the attention they crave, quiet time with a book or a puzzle. Yes, it's not the amount of time a parent spends with their child, is it? It's the quality of it.
Quality of time over quality of money, which a lot of parents now maybe spend a lot of money on the children, but they're not time rich. And yeah, I think timing is lovely. And it's a little bit back to what I mentioned briefly earlier. We used to call it attention seeking behaviour, but actually if you flip it on its head, the child's wanting to connect with you. And it's really sad if you think that they have to behave in a set way to get some attention.
Absolutely.
And that's learned, isn't it, from maybe if parents aren't connecting with them as much as they could do at home as well.
And we have a really fab parent app where to really encourage parents to do more with their children, but not necessarily sit down and read a book, but just doing their everyday things and making those into learning opportunities for the children, and also sharing information from nursery, etc. As well. Okay, so here we go. We've got another one. I also asked them how they'd feel being put in timeout. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of parents were put in timeout. And they're just following through what happened to them, I think, because parents don't have the knowledge and the skills that we learn through our training and our experience. No child comes with a handbook.
No, unfortunately. And even if it did, it might not be the right model. If you think, I don't know what car you drive and what car I drive, but they're probably vastly different. They might be similar, but they're vastly different, aren't they? So even if there was a handbook at birth, it's not going to suit everybody, is it?
No, absolutely. That was a good analogy with car, Sue. And communication and language is so important. Please put your phones away when you come collect your child. Scenarios.
Another plan. You'll see from my Facebook, not my Facebook group, my website, that on my parents hub page that I do have a little star. It says parent workshops, and if you click on it, there's nothing there yet. But my idea behind that is that there might be a few, maybe 15 minutes, little podcast things to share with parents. But then moving forward, I do want to spend time maybe recording an hour's worth of something for parents, but as a view maybe for the nurseries to purchase a license for it. So whether that's weaning or whether it's toilet training or ditching the dummy or behaviour or whatever it is.
We need to talk. We need to talk about that.
Yeah. So we get those kind of insight, but then they've got it forever. If it gets updated, then obviously they might have to pay for it again, but they've got it for 12 months or 24. I haven't really worked it out yet, but I'm thinking if they buy it, then they've got the link. Similar to what the some of the people on the call tonight, they've got the link to share the playback with the parents about the self-regulation workshop. It says forever. So I was thinking things like that, maybe phase 1 phonics, and there's all sorts of things, isn't there? That the parents, healthy eating, whatever, there's all sorts of things, isn't there, that we can help parents with, because some parents, if they don't know, they'll only do that what was done to them as a child. And some of them want to do
the total opposite, because they didn't agree with that, so they let their child be, let their child free and to do whatever they like. For example, if they were very highly disciplined. Oh, you've gone. She's disappeared on us. Oh dear. Oh dear. Well, anybody else got any questions? Hopefully she'll come back. I'll have to put my glasses back on. Because I'll probably have to give her. Oh, she's gone. Okay, anybody got anything else? Oh, yeah, I've blurred that one out. Anybody else got any comments? Have you found this evening useful? If it'd be really lovely if you wait to the very end and then you can give us a quick review, and then I can share that with Sue. Oh, good. I'm pleased about that. Thank you. All right, well, as Sue's not here, and I think we were about to finish anyway, I'm going to run the last little piece, and I will be in touch with you soon, so you'll have, so you'll be able to access. Okay. Oh, here she is. Wonderful.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there, because my Wi-Fi is still on, but my battery is a little bit dicey in my laptop, so maybe it's a little bit wobbler. Sorry.
We were just talking about nobody else has got anything to ask. I asked if they felt tonight was useful, and I got a yes, thank you. So we were sort of wrapping up, Sue, but is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think that's been quite we've covered lots of things, haven't we? We've been around the world and up and down and all over the place, haven't we? So I think we've done really well. I've really enjoyed speaking with everybody, and I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what happened with that connection then.
Don't worry, I'll sort that out. Thank you very much, Sue, for coming.